all I want to say is we're going to have some fun because I pulled in all former federal executives are fun, but these are three of the most fun. And I think you'll see that as we go through our panel today. So I am Luann Drossman, and thank you, Rita, and thank you, MX, for inviting me and our Government Marketing University ambassadors to come and present today. To be an ambassador at GMarkU, you must have been in public service, and all of these individuals they were all in the C-suite. They'll talk a little bit about what their roles were. But first, I think I can say on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service that you gave us.
Thank you.
Also today, in all good marketing fashion, we'd like to keep this very informative, very engaging. Instead of waiting to the end for Q&A, if you have a question, let's ask it. If one of the ambassadors are talking about a topic that you'd like to dig a little deeper, ask. We've got plenty of time. We've got, an hour and 20 minutes, give or take? So let's use it all up and walk out of here with a lot of new knowledge. Cool? Hi, Scott. All right, so what I've asked our panel to do first is a brief introduction of where they served in government and what they're doing today. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Keith Trippi.
Hi, everyone. It's exciting. I'm loud. It's exciting to be here to talk about network switches. So for the next hour, wrong room. No, we're not going to talk about that boring stuff. So Keith Trippi retired from DHS a few years ago. I was at the head shed, and when I started DHS, I looked 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, looked like Matthew McConaughey. 10 years in government. This is what happens. So excited to be here with the group. And since I left DHS, I've got a couple of startups, and I've launched a Facebook Live show, which we'll talk a little bit about how maybe a different marketing opportunity for you guys into the government. So glad to be here.
Thanks. Ms. Karen Britton.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Karen Britton. I have spent majority of my career in the federal government, majority of it in Navy, and 20 years there, and then 5 years at White House, serving under the Obama administration, which was a very exciting time. We ran end-to-end IT on the unclassified side and did a lot of work with mobile and CRM. I have left, and I am now serving in a woman-owned IT consulting firm, and with a lot of you trying to navigate the space and really help out federal CIOs in their strategy. So glad to be here.
Wonderful. And Mr. Pete Saronis.
Yes, awesome. Excited to be here. It's great to see Keith and Karen, especially when we ran in the same circles in government. I spent 25 years in government, started at the Pentagon right out of college. The V is Villanova, for those of you wondering what that means. So, go Nova. Worked my way over to the Department of Education and then finished the 8 final years at the Department of Energy. Most amazing place, very biased, but it's a very unique agency. So selling into and marketing to that environment, we'll talk a bit about today that I think would be helpful. 2 years and a week out, started my company Dots and Bridges. It's been awesome. It's been a roller coaster of emotion. You go out and hang a shingle. I was talking with Karen, you leave government as a C-suite. I joke about, we're no longer the shiny penny, so we have to go say to those folks, well, you'll just see about that. And you either hang in there and get through it, or you jump back into an awesome role in the government space. But my company's called Dots and Bridges. It stands for Connecting Dots and Building Bridges. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. If you're interested, I do a lot of work on the commercial side. Since I left government, I like to keep my foot in the government door as much as the government's willing to have an old guy back there wanting to help them be successful. But I have tenets around money, message, and mission that will blend into today's discussion. And I will say, for the purposes of today, what they don't tell you when you go hang a shingle is, yeah, you're going to be your own boss, you're going to be your own BD, you're going to be your own sales, you're going to be your own messaging, you're going to be your own secretary, you're going to be... So I've got some practical, wow, I didn't expect all that. So I have all the respect in the world for those in that industry today, even if you're working for someone. But if my pearls of wisdom help, we'll just see about that as well. So I look forward to it, looking forward to the dialogue.
You know, and it's interesting, something you just mentioned, something I learned by working with our ambassadors, and Kimberly Hancher specifically. Kimberly her last role was the EEOC CIO. But one day we're talking about marketing, and you know how as marketers we get all excited. And she's like, whoa, 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 you're giving me a headache. What is marketing versus sales versus business development? What is the channel? And it was quite an eye-opener because she was a 34-year career public sector employee, and she didn't know those roles. And so think about this as we're reaching into these government agencies, and we're like, hello, this is Luann Brossman, and I'm in sales, or I'm business development. You don't really know what that means on the other side. Who knew, right? So that's a tip to start with. And I'd like to educate our panel a little bit about who's in the audience. So how many of you in the audience are in business development? So they're the ones that are capturing, right? Going after those big proposals. How many of you are in sales? How many of you are in marketing? And I would say all should raise their hand because every single person in the world markets to the government, right? So awesome. All right, so we have a pretty good feeling here of who our audience is. All right, let's start out. We are just finishing, as we all know, the government fiscal year. And we have a radio program on Federal News Radio, and it's called Market Chat. It's on once a quarter, and our recent program was around end of buying season hype, fact or fiction. So many times we're told by marketers that their sales organization comes in July, we need to do a program real quick because we want to affect end of year sales. Hello, how are you? So that's what we want to talk about. So Karen, what the heck? You know, is it worth doing a marketing campaign in August? Is it fact or fiction?
Well, I would definitely say it's worth doing a marketing campaign in the summertime because, you know, as we were just talking about it, summertime, you need to know the phraseology and the terms. When we're in summer months, what's the government doing? And the government, quite honestly, as many of you know, are in government sweeps, right? So they're sweeping up, there's prioritization of who gets the money. And in many cases, if you're in a department, you're in an agency, you're working in a program, you are there. So you understand the environment, you understand the culture, you know what's going on, you know where the priorities are. And if this is a win-win and a connection for you and something that you do, is kind of back to what Pete was saying about, you know, that connection, then you are poised and at the ready for being able to support and get that funding. I mean, you know, literally, if you're in place, then that can work and has worked. And I've seen that work. We were just talking about this with Keith. Keith was in a position I know, was it recent as this year?
It was a few years back.
But again, if you are poised and you are positioned, you can be there for that. So that is another critical thing. I, in my company, have done that. We winded up doing an assessment, a gap analysis, and quite honestly, the agency wanted to move forward with the strategic plan. They got the money in the summer. So I would definitely say that is something that all marketers should be well aware of and to be positioned and poised for that.
So to be positioned, we're hearing that you need to be familiar with them. You need to be
Yes.
familiar with the company name and the product, which leads us to think marketers probably early on should be making sure that you're aware of that. And then the sales and BD people are out sniffing because they could have that opportunity.
That's
Safe to
exactly
say?
right. Yes, that's
Keith,
exactly
okay.
right.
Yeah, end of the year money, it is fact. It's not fiction, right? So this was the procurement people every August and September because I was running down there to go, I got some cash, I want to do this, I want to do that, and they were all hiding from me because I was going to make them do work. So it kind of is dependent upon who the exec is that's trying to move it forward, but it absolutely does happen. I was telling a story that 11:50 something p.m., 30 September, I did $1 million award.
That was one happy
And I
salesperson.
got the money at like 6:30 that morning. And I went to my procurement office and they said, get the hell out of here. So what did I do? I went to GSA. Groveled and begged, it wasn't pretty. But over the course of the day, we did a full procurement, right? We went out to X number of vendors and they got it done. God bless GSA. Good job, Mary. So they got that done. So it absolutely can be done. So what happens internally, the mechanics, if you guys aren't aware of kind of how this works, is come June, this money isn't committed. Everybody know the difference between committed and obligated? Pretty much?
Why don't you explain it?
All right. So two very, very important terms on the Fed side. Committed means the program guy that's got all the money or the gal that's got all the money, not the contracts people, have got to take the money out of their checking account and commit it to the contracts office, typically through a PR. And that means we've committed the funds out of my account into an account that really, there's a lot of paperwork if I want to pull that money back. So what that means, and it signals to leadership, CFOs that come with the brooms, is back off, this money's being committed to something, right? And once it's at that phase, that's a good sign that it's coming out the door. Obligated means the contract's been awarded to one of you guys in the room. Two totally different things. But committed is a key step in the June, July timeframe that says, CFO, all you guys back off. The money that is still sitting in my checking account at that point in time in June and July, there are dates and cutoffs. If this money isn't committed or obligated by X date, we're going to come get it. And then that money will be pooled together, and some of that money will leave the CIO or the program office, because the CFO may say, I want to take some of that money and go to a human capital thing, whatever. Once it gets to that phase, well, it's out of my checking account. I can't do anything with it. That said, we all do UFERs, unfunded requests, that starts in the June, July. Anybody know what UFERs are? It's basically a wish list of, please give me some money at the end of the year. Well, when the money goes and the CIO is looking at it and the CFO, if they don't take some of it, CIOs make a wish list. Here's all the things I want to do, and they break it up and it's in a spreadsheet. That is the money that if the CIO can keep some of that, they make a compelling enough case. Well, that's where you guys, if you've done the marketing right, you're teeing yourself up. So that's just a little backdrop on the mechanics of what's happening internally while we're running around. But the other side of this is, what do we buy? Anybody server business, infrastructure, software? Woo, the government loves to write big checks to get that money out the door. Why? Because that's the way it's been done for a very long time. So that's what they know how to do. That's one thing that they like to buy. The other thing, like I bought, was I got a little pilot off the ground, right? It was something that somebody wanted in the political. I was able to make that happen. But these little, small little $250,000 to $1 million projects, pilots can get off the ground too during that time. So if you've got stuff that kind of fits in those spaces, could be interesting how you position on the marketing and then go for the close if you know that that program person's going to have a couple of bucks.
Sure, and I would add to that, particularly if you are, 8A, or if you graduated 8A and you're on the STARS 2, and you have an easy vehicle where they can get to you directly.
Yep.
When we're talking about this summertime and folks are trying to do, and it could be something small, it could be an assessment, it could be a review of something, they can get to you, and they know that because you've marketed to them, you're in the space, and it's really easy to actually get that money to your company.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that topic? Steve?
So this morning they were saying in the MGT Act, they have working capital funds. So how do you see that dynamic changing entirely? I mean, does end of the year just go away altogether?
And what is that act? What does that stand for?
Modernization of government technology. Can I riff off our
Yes,
last?
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to bring the soft skill approach to this. So I didn't summarize. I worked in many a CIO office, worked in the data center, and lived the world of ping power pipe, and spent a lot of money for a number of years on the stuff that is comprised within that 90 billion or whatever that is every year, right? That the government will spend on legacy, 70, 80% of it. MGT's trying to kind of fix that. Like, what are we doing to move beyond keeping the lights on? My last 8 years at Energy as a CTO afforded me, by choice, the opportunity to say, I'm going to dive into the mission. I'm going to be the advocate for everybody in this room. And I do agree. I did not know the difference between a BD, sales rep, sales engineer, what the hell a channel was, the supply chain of sales. I have a big time appreciation for it now. But I also know there's a different message that each one of you who were selling to me as a CTO. And I was the guy that opened the door and said, come please tell me what great stuff you have. Because if I don't advocate for it, it's going to be a hard sell for you. Now, you can go all you want to the CIO and pull out an org chart when you're meeting with folks and hiring a former Fed and saying, tell me how I can get to that person, versus the question should be, are these the right people I should be talking to? And if they're not the right people, help me understand the message I should probably take to the person I should. That's a totally different theme than what I see in industry. I refuse to sell my Rolodex and knock on doors for people. Why? Because what's the point? You need help with messaging, you should go in and be the rock star. You should find out who are those folks with the money. Keith's a good example of a guy who actually wanted to make a difference in a CIO type of community, knew the programs, and he was a go-getter. He was an advocate on behalf of. I'd say that's totally in the minority in terms of when you work in the ultimate nonprofit, hey, the end of the year, I'm sorry, it's a seasonality of government. You should be every quarter thinking about what's going to happen before the end of the year, what's happening the first 3 months of a fiscal year. You should be refining your message on who has the money, who reads appropriation requests. Don't lie. Who reads a strategic plan where the money's being spent? You want to walk into that CIO, CTO program official and educate them. You want to make them curious. You don't want them to say, what are you all about? Thanks for your PowerPoint. You got 3 people here. You got 30 minutes. Are they the right person? Do they really want to sit there? I say walk in, and this is coming from experience. Have your message tight. Go in and ask maybe 1 or 2 questions. I put a public domain blog on this on my LinkedIn profile. No promotion, just how to sell to Uncle Sam. So go read about it. Be curious, ask questions. Regardless of who you're talking to, you want them to become an advocate, right? If you're chasing money at the end of the year, that's a one and done. You want the Fed to say, they didn't come in and sell snake oil to me. They came in and educated me, and I kind of want to learn a little bit more. So that's a soft skill approach versus it's end of year, I want to get a UFRIN, I want to get somebody to give me some cash, and I hope I have a Keith Trippian or a Karen who's going to chase it down for me. Man, that's a wing and a prayer. I say, think about the seasonality of government and work every quarter because there's always something happening in the federal budget process. People say, oh, this is the holiday season, nobody's doing anything. This is a happy time of the season to be talking to people, cultivate a relationship, kick off the new year when everybody's depressed and saying, oh, geez, the new budget's coming out, here come those snake oil folk again. You're not snake oil salesmen. Hell, I'm not. But if you can establish that relationship, right? You folks learn it in your sales funnel classes, right? Prospect, cultivate, close. I don't close. I help people learn how to cultivate, prospect, so you can be successful. That's what I think this industry, your industry, if you do a little bit of that, the folks in the government are going to take notice. Don't overlook that soft skill or those soft skills.
Yeah, that's great.
I was going to follow back up on the working capital fund. Everybody know the mechanics, and I'll keep it not
I think
boring.
you should explain it.
All right, so working capital fund. There's DM&E money, net new money, development money, and then there's O&M money. Working capital fund is somewhat good for O&M, horrible for DM&E, right? So if the model is, let's look at a traditional data center bill that's $80 million a year, and the costs are somewhat fixed, slight increases, then WICA working capital fund can work pretty well. Working capital fund, just like the PPBE cycle, takes 18 months. Lots of internal stuff goes on between us and CIO, the program offices. At DHS, you had the head shed where I was, and then you had all the components. Well, if WICA is done well, it can work, but there's a lot of times that there's a sense that it's more of a tax. And part of the challenge there is a working capital fund is, can you provide government, CIO, if you're providing that enterprise service, clear transparency on why your bill is $8 million and why your bill is $4 million? Because when there's doubt, it starts to come apart. I've been involved in many working capital funds. So if you're in the line of business where working capital fund and you're providing O&M, or you're on a contract that's providing O&M, or you want to go try to unseat an incumbent on an O&M sort of vehicle, that could be interesting. But on DM&E, on the net new starts, things like that, it's going to be very difficult for that. But I think the marketing and sales aspect would be slightly different because there isn't going to be a lot of net new in a working capital fund because it's just too damn hard to go up, right? You can go down a little bit, but going up with that, with net new stuff, it's a battle internally.
Break. And I don't disagree, so I'm going to be kind of a third party. I say the government's spending $90 billion a year, go get it. I don't care if it's DME, I don't care if it's O&M. It's how you market yourself and your product to solve a problem that the Cybersecurity Executive Order 13800 is saying, government, we're tired of the same old, go innovate, bring us some products to mitigate our cyber hygiene. You get caught up in that DME and OM and asking for colors and changes of money, that's not you can wing in a prayer, hope that somebody's going to go fight that battle for you. Again, advocate for. Instead, I like what Keith was saying, right? And I said this same thing too. And Karen, I don't want to suck any air, but I would love your feedback too. Go in with a pilot. Say, I got a proof of concept idea,
Yeah.
and they'll figure out how to get money to do that, because that resonates with the Fed. Resonated with me, and I had no cash for 5 years. Because you know what? I had full autonomy to say, hey, I'm not gonna pay you a red cent, but I'll go get 20 people who want to do a pilot for your product, and we'll put together a use case. And if that proof of concept plays out, trust me, we'll socialize it. It's a good story
That's a
to
great
tell.
call to action
Yeah.
for marketers, absolutely.
It is.
Kind of
Karen?
segueing into this topic, it works perfect into our next question. I think you must have known that. So we're all taught, try to get the interest and the availability from the C-suite. Try to do marketing to a CIO, to a CTO, to a CISO. Well, let's kind of peel the onion layers back on that. Tell us what you did when you were in that position in government and where you went to find information. We'll get a little deeper into this later on webinars and white papers, but what the heck does a C-level person do during procurement? And how can a marketer get visibility?
Well, how can a marketer get visibility? I mean, we were good because, to the point that Pete brought up, we kind of opened our doors. And so we wanted to hear from you and, you know, pushing the envelope, kind of flipping things on its head from an innovation perspective. But where do we go? I mean, I think today's environment, we do want short snippets of information. Let's face it, facts.
MTV
People don't have a lot of time. So events where, and people don't have a lot of travel either. You know, we're NCR, so people are not doing a lot of traveling. But events that may be more akin to morning events, trade shows, people go to magazines, people look on social media and so on. So that kind of thing that may be captivating, that captures someone's attention. It is about knowing yourself and the market that you're in, because if, for instance, somebody does go to your website, are they going to be able to ascertain what it is that you're in, what business you're in? So knowing that niche and carefully crediting that content with that information, I think, is key, because that's what we're looking for. That's where we're going.
And you're going to the websites.
And you're going to that. Yeah. And know that you just can't be all things to all people.
Right.
That's the thing. Kind of narrowly define that. You need to be agile and pliable with where you go and how you get out. But I think you need to narrowly focus on what it is that you do, because on the one end, you get that narrowly defined, but on the other end, you strategize and you kind of have that strategic partner to shore up the gap. You may be applications development. You may not be really heavy and deep into data analytics, but you may have that strategic partner who is. So I think that helps.
In marketing to the C-suite, rarely did I take a meeting and go talk to a contracts officer and say, cut $1 million procurement. Like, never. What did I do if I found something interesting in a 30-minute meeting? I'd tell one of my lieutenants, have a conversation with these guys and let them flow it. Why? I oversaw a pretty healthy budget. I didn't write any procurements. My lieutenants did, and their staff did. So you talk to folks at our level, okay, there may be some interest, maybe not, but if there is, lieutenants execute. A GS-14 may be the one at the end of the day that's going to cut a $6 million procurement. They're going to work the requirements and all that stuff. Execs aren't going to do that. So if you flash attention to get on my radar, great, but just know it ain't me.
What's
gonna
the
be someone on the
percentage,
staff.
would you say, of information you're pushing down to your lieutenants, which I'm assuming are IT directors, program managers,
managers.
13, 14, 15. What's the percentage of that happening versus them recommending up, being the influencer?
I'll comment on that. I think, again, it's a bit of a crapshoot. You're assuming the people you want to sell to are incentivized every day to find the next cool thing. They're doing the research and market or tech diligence, as I've learned in the travels at Silicon Valley and Boston and Austin lately. It's who in the Fed is actually looking at what's on the horizon and looking at tech road mapping. The good news is, I would venture to say not probably too many, because they're too busy. They may be caught up on mandates and compliance, and that's a given. Why do we have such an O&M buy? Because what do you hear from most of the FITARA community? We don't have time to be innovative, okay? So to Keith's point, Karen's point, if you go in and educate the person, whoever it is, and say, here's what differentiates us from our, not competition, partners. You've probably spent a ton of money, publicly domain. Department of Energy just yesterday, announced they're probably going to spend $1.8 billion on IT this year. What are they spending it on?
Boo.
Probably a lot of cyber stuff, application development, cloud investment, mobility. If you're in any of those spaces, which I think we all are in your marketing, what's going to differentiate you? What makes you special? That's what I have found. This is Pete Cerona, CTO, who set up a vendor engagement program, would say, when you come in, please don't bring a PowerPoint. And if you do, it's okay. I'll give you a week, come on back. Tell me what, no, and that's what we would do, because I felt like kind of like bad. It was sales engineer, business development. I wanted to talk to the sales engineer, but he didn't or she didn't say much. It was the salesperson, and then I'm like, the BD person's trying to get in there, and I'm like, look, I want to learn something today. So come back. We'll have some coffee. We'll talk. Do me a solid. Read our strategic plan. Don't just read my LinkedIn profile. Tell me where you're doing business in other parts of the government, not so much even at energy. A lot of folks in your industry say, we don't do any business in energy, but look at all the commercial partners. Hey, tell me a cool use case with your commercial partner. Don't gloss over that sheet. Today in my business, most of my clients are commercial. I do a thing that Luann and colleagues in the marketing industry know. I've created these CXO roundtables where I spend 2 hours with feds and commercial. And what's very compelling to the feds, and it's a thing that I experienced when I was a fed, was I liked hearing from the C-suite of commercial, because they were quicker to market than a C-suite in the government. No knock on any of my brethren. It takes us 18 months to do anything, and then we're already behind the curve, and you're reading Gartner reports, and we're always hoping, oh, well, when are we going to chase our own tail? We're chasing our tails. Why not get a story? Your companies have commercial sides. Bring them in. Talk about how you're supporting a sector like the energy sector to the Department of Energy or to Homeland Security on critical infrastructure. And educate those people on, look, this is how cloud's being captured. This is how the financial markets, if you're calling on Treasury, is you are using big data analytics and cyber to protect the New York Stock Exchange. If it's good enough for those sectors, I got to believe it's good enough for the Treasury Department. Problem is, who's listening to that message? So this is the homework. This will differentiate each one of you and your companies and your messaging, and that money will be discovered. You won't even have to ask for it. Like I said, $90 billion will be spent. Question is, are you going after it? Because if something's not working, your message is off. And yeah, you're talking to the wrong people. So it's not who's the CIO. It's not who's Pete Cerona. So he's got to, look, I have to be sold in a good enough way to take your message to knock on doors down the hall who spends $1 billion on HPC at the Department of Energy. And that's my job. That's our jobs. That is our C-suite job. And then if we have lieutenants or people who, it's selling them to kind of come to work and give a shit. So there's a lot that in the world of sales I understand. If you get lucky, you joined a company and you closed a deal and you think, hey, this is easy. I mean, you all know that's not the case. That's luck, happenstance. So again, comments, feedback, questions. I don't want to pontificate, but are you folks running into these challenges? Are you doing the same thing over and over and it's not working? Look in the mirror. What can you do different?
That's your story, which I've always liked, about coffee, how you'll take a coffee meeting.
Mm-hmm. But you're going to meet me on my turf. And my turf was 6:37 in the morning. Because that's when I was free, right? The other 3 million federal employees didn't get in until 9. So I had a couple hours of me time to catch up on paperwork or whatnot. And if you wanted to meet me there at the office or go grab some coffee across the way, and I'm interested in kind of whatever, I've got a problem and it seems like you may have something interesting, I'll do that. But you're not going to come to me at 11 o'clock because the day's rocking and rolling and I got problems.
And he's childless, so it's always good in
I
a
work
meeting
14
find
hours a
out,
day.
hey, it's always good, a great question to ask. Know where they went to school? My wife's from Pittsburgh. I got 4 great kids, 11 and under. That gets my dialogue going. I get to know people on a human level.
That's true.
And you know
That's so
what?
important.
Then it's like, and Keith, he's an early riser. He's got dogs. They're kids in some
They're my
people's worlds.
babies.
I got kids that I can't get out of the house today until, but he's spot on.
Yeah.
You get to know somebody, it's like they may live down the street from you. Don't make it a salesy thing. Hell, I didn't know Karen was right down in Silver Spring, but hey, let's grab some coffee.
Right.
Doesn't even have to be on work time, because Keith's right.
Yeah.
You try to make it where, hey, can I get in there and get, you're assuming they're going to care, they're not busy, they're going to pay attention, and they're not going to bring 3 people to the meeting that you'd rather be getting Keith's insights on. That's a one-on-one thing. So again, I'm not saying break your traditional models. I'm saying come up with some other way of just kind of to put a dent in that armor of maybe there's something.
Yeah, think outside
Look
the
where
box.
Keith went to school, man. You might know my fraternity brother. That's going to break down some balls.
I think it's to the point that you were bringing up about the soft skills. I like to coin the term ROC, that relationship opportunity contract. You've got to get that relationship going, because if you do get that 6:30 meeting, so what's going to happen is, you should have by this time, if you're in the department, in the agency, you should have been all ears, just listening, understanding the environment, understanding the culture. Are they a hybrid cloud and on-prem environment? What is that? Because the questions that you're going to ask an executive like Keith Trippey he's going to know from those questions that you're asking what you know. And so you come together to have that shared understanding. This isn't necessarily about you, because yes, you can have your leave behind, you can have your glossy, you can direct them to your website, which is updated, which has that content, which talks about your niche, which talks about what you do. But in that conversation that you're having, you're bringing that shared understanding. And if he's trying to articulate the problem, if you can kind of help him do that, then he knows, oh, you've done this before, or you have an understanding. And that partner that you're working with, either in another agency or in the commercial, you can say, I've done this. So I think, you're realizing, do we have a connection, or not necessarily, this isn't a good fit.
Right.
You tend to get that if you do garner that type of meeting and really, really use it to your value.
Sure. And I guess the only thing I would add to that is, when we're talking, right, whether it's on a first date or you're coming into the room, it's the same, but we're all humans, right? In my scenario, I was sizing you up. If we did a relationship, are you a vendor or are you a partner? And in my mind, in that first 30 minutes, I'm putting you in a bucket, right or wrong. And if you're in the vendor bucket, there's 1,000 other. But if I think you'll be a partner, that's totally different, right? I'm willing to maybe give you a little bit more time to have a conversation, or I'm willing to refer you onto my staff to go have another conversation. But I think you're wham bam, thank you, ma'am. I'm out. Right?
This segues into what all of us marketers are striving to do today, which is agency-based marketing. That's the big buzzword. It's been around forever, but now it's getting a lot of attention. All of the ambassadors that we meet with all say, don't go talk generic, talk about my mission, talk about my problems, talk about what my agency is going through. On the marketing side, when you're creating content, follow these individuals and what they're saying on Twitter, or go to presentations where they're talking. Once they put something out there public, we all know in this room, it's out there. And you can use it in your marketing, and you can quote them, and you can follow them and know what they're talking about. So any comments from any of the 3 of you on agency-based messaging? Really talking to your topic, what your agency is focused on. It's a given. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
I think we could all agree that when you come in and lead with, we know your mission, that's, we're a cyber company. We're a big data company. I like to joke that, any agency that, not named the Department of Energy, that tries to talk maybe the DOD and a few others about what big data is, it's funny. I mean, supercomputing's big data, right? Asset managements and laptops and how many phones, that's data. But think about, you got to take the message from OMB. You've got to look at the executive orders. You got to look at the guidance documents that are holding agencies accountable. I mean, it's right there in front of you. They got to do something every 3 months or every 6 months whenever OMB puts out the guidance or a policy rooted or baked off of a executive order. I mean, that's an entree to, I can go help this agency out. I know exactly what the OMB is asking them to do, so why don't I go help them out? There's most likely going to be an analytics play, an information sharing play, actionable and applied intelligence play. And when you go over the conversation, just align your company's capability, your solution to it. I say, you don't crap on your competition, and I say it over. To Keith's point, that's a bad sign when I hear somebody say that. And if you come in and say you're a silver bullet, I don't even show it. Sometimes I joke, and if I know the person, I'm going to be like, do you want to retract that? I mean, silver bullet? I'll believe if you tell me how you distinguish yourself from the 3 that I know are your competition. It's not to embarrass, it's to coach, it's to mentor, it's to help them educate me so that when I go do an advocation role, hey, my credibility is at stake inside the halls of the department. Those CIOs at FITARA, if you've been watching any of the testimonies yesterday, there were 3 agencies. I mean, the CIO's role, even per FITARA, requires them to be involved in the mission of their agency. So if you want to help a CIO who has money, and they don't have all the money, understand what you want the CIO or his or her lieutenants to be your ambassadors. And you know how you do that? You tell them a story. You make them curious. You give them the homework that they're going to ask you for and say, well, you know what? We took 800-53 and we're already looking at version 5. Here's how our capabilities align to it. And if that can help you reduce or increase or make better your grade on FITARA or FSMA, man, I mean, you know, you're hitting on all cylinders for me.
Yeah, that's great.
If I have
and
to ask you to do something, it's not that, imagine if you had that already. And you could do that every day a week, I like to say 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. There's always a mandate and a compliance coming out. DCOI, data center closures, information management for data center optimization. I mean, it's all right there. Are you doing the homework to make the cultivation? Because the cultivation piece is huge. If you connect with the person and you're giving them information that can raise their profile, look, all the awards and all this great stuff, my mentors in government past said, stick it in a box, put it in your office when you leave, Pete, and then come tell me how often that you put that stuff up in your house, you know? And it's a great affirmation. But you know what it really was? It was industry helping raise my profile, giving me information to win a Fed 100 award a couple times or an Innovator of the Year award. I mean, awards are great, but usually it's because somebody in industry helped me raise my profile. And how do you do that? You build and cultivate, but you also create some semblance of my product, my solution, my service will enhance your mission, because I know that's your responsibility. Every Fed in government will preach mission, 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 mission. Usually it's compliance, 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 compliance. And the mission activity happens down or secondary to the CIO's responsibilities. So it's I don't know how to say it. It's all hidden in plain view.
Well, that's
Just
an
go
area
after
too
it.
that I think marketers can help sales, business development, and I teach all the time. It's so important that marketers have a seat at the table in those business development, capture management meetings, keeping your ear on topics. We talk thought leadership for 20-some years. Now it's kind of like a topic leadership, right? If it's a FITARA or if it's one of the many mandates of multiple numbers coming out of Congress, as long as marketing is also understanding that, we know that their sales organizations are, that's going to better enable you to create the content that the ambassadors here are talking about today. All right, I want to switch topics unless anybody has any questions up to this point.
Come on, there's got to be some questions.
All right. I have to say, until recently, we had Karen on our Federal News Radio program, and she was very passionate about making us all understand continuing resolutions. And honestly, my 30 years in marketing, I knew it. If somebody had put me in a corner and made me describe really what it meant, couldn't do it. It would be like, it's hard to market then, it's hard to sell then, but that's not really true. So let's talk about our new reality of continuing resolution, because it's here to stay, probably. And how do we market and sell in our new reality? Karen.
I mean, you're right. It is a new reality, right? When is the last time, how many years can we go back to when we haven't had a CR in place?
Yeah, and
right?
why don't you take it back
And
to those
it's-
times and describe what it means as well?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Right.
assuming a lot of you fess up, right? We don't really know.
You don't
we just
really
know we
know,
don't
right?
like it, but we don't
I
know
mean,
why.
so how many times have we seen where the president comes and submits their budget and it's not fully passed and or accepted by the Congress, right? But in continuing resolution, where we have this short interim time frame where we need the federal government to operate, we need to have the activities forward, we need to pay for personnel, we need to do things like we've seen this year coming out of, as an example, a major hurricane storm season. Where would we be if we didn't have FEMA boots on the ground? And that's just one example of many facets in the area of the government that need to have that continuation for operations. So we're good. We're good through at least December 8th at midnight, right? But
That's
having
like 2 weeks away. Yeah.
and yes, but knowing that and being poised in position for instance, you're in an agency, you're in a department, you know that there are no new starts. So where can you help and support your client and customer? That is to know that what they're continuing on, and I'm not just saying things are in maintenance mode, but no new starts meaning no new programs, but what they're continuing on, that you're there and you're poised for whatever that work looks like, or if there is any likelihood that they may lose that, you can help with identifying what are the risks of not continuing that program. So there's the cost avoidance, there's the stop work on an existing program, or there's the risk of not doing it. And you're positioned and poised in in an area where you have that client. If you are at this point, and we're in the fall, and you're not in an agency, for instance, then I think you should be devoting some time to really looking at that pipeline. It kind of gets back to what Pete was saying. Are you going to go deep and within your vertical, or are you going to go broader? Are you going to go outside that department, outside that agency? In DOE, when you start to think about the field sites and the labs, in some cases, they're the real folks with the money, not necessarily the
Mission.
headquarters.
Yeah, they're the mission.
So that gets to the mission. So where are you going to dedicate your time, and how is that pipeline looking? What does that look like for you? And that's the time to really spend some focused effort on that. So either you're in and you know those initiatives that are ongoing and you're supporting those, or you're outside of that and you're looking at some of the pipeline areas.
There's a question.
Can you talk to situations where maybe there's not an initiative? Let's say a vendor has a solution to a problem that's not quite fully recognized as a problem yet by the organization, but is a big problem, and how you'd market to educate the customer of the problem and your ability to solve it?
2 steps ahead of the crowd, you're crazy. 1 step ahead, you're rich. So who says it's a problem? Do you say it's a problem? Do I think it's a problem?
So I recognize a problem, right? Maybe I'm former government, I saw the problem, go start a company.
Right.
Government doesn't see the problem yet. Industry sees the problem, adopting new technology. Government hasn't seen it yet. So how would I market to that?
Well, 1, get out of the bucket 2, where you're 2 steps ahead, right?
Yep.
Because they won't take the meeting. So you've really got to make it personal. You got to personalize it to them, know who they are. Are they an operations sort of person? Not me, boring stuff. Innovative, right? What bucket are these individuals in? And then how does that problem manifest itself in their day-to-day life? Because if it may be a problem to you, like on some infrastructure, on some switch. Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
I don't care. Go talk to somebody else that cares about switches. So I think you've really got to tailor the problem to not only that mission, but that individual. Because I mean, you can talk to me all day long. It's not a problem I care about. So you've really got to understand who you're going to be saying it's a problem.
So to get out from 2 steps ahead, you got to customize to the audience.
Absolutely,
specifically.
right?
Sure do.
What likes cookies and has 2 thumbs? This guy. Well, know that I like cookies, right? Chocolate chips.
Dipped in milk.
Yeah.
Yep. Pete?
Just quick sidebar. I wouldn't categorize problem. I'd use here's an opportunity for you, an agency official, in light of the president's executive order, pick one out, an OMB reference. Everything you read talks about protecting information assets in the government today, right? Cyber's everywhere, but don't say cyber. It's like, how do I safeguard the critical information, the asset at my agency? And if you have something that isn't there to solve a problem, but to mitigate risk, that's a great lead-in. If you're going to mitigate risk to an agency's profile, OPM, Equifax, how it's being done in commercial, the problems that the government's seeing on the commercial side are things they're going to try to avoid. Okay, so it might not be a government problem, the ultimate nonprofit. Bad stuff happens, the head of the agency at OPM gets but everybody else is working, you know? Does the government care about risk, or should I say financial loss or reputational loss if bad things happen? Yeah, they do, but it's a little different on the commercial side, right? You can talk to those stories to the Fed if you have a product that's, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 10 steps ahead. I mean, Keith's point, right? That crawl, walk, run with the government. But the challenges today, opportunities, are going and say, we can provide those insights because of analytics. It's hot. Advanced analytics are hot. My space is critical infrastructure, advanced analytics, and cyber. If you can tell a story around that triage, I got to work at places like Energy and work with DHS. Those are 3 pretty good places to start with, and then distill it down so it's an opportunity for their profile to protect that information that you can go in and talk to anybody about. And then that's aligning your mission, your capability, your product to that opportunity.
Well, I'm curious, what is the problem? Now I'm biting. all right?
See,
I'm a curious cat.
you got his
what's the problem?
curiosity.
The problem is human memory limitations, cognitive biases, helping folks keep track of data. Cyber.
As a marketer, I'd want to say, okay, I have some sexy technology, right? Because that's,
Yes.
you can't say that, but
Polarity is the company. if you
Yeah.
wanna Give a commercial.
He's getting a commercial on.
I think, and tell me if you agree or disagree, the trick with that is how do you map it back to an existing program because you're under a CR and you're not starting something new. So it's how well do you understand what's out there now and how that solution can tack back to something that already has money associated to it. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Right, because as
I
you
mean,
were talking, I was thinking, well, hell, I can't remember yesterday. I was thinking about me, and I have crappy memory. But if you could take that and tailor it back to something that we're doing and make it relevant, because it's
Yeah.
an interesting topic. Sounds really smart.
I was thinking about research and regulatory agencies like HHS and people that may need that. All right, I don't know if that's a space that you're in, or are you tailoring? Is that one of your verticals? But that's some of what could actually need that type of support that you're providing.
Here's a tip. There's about 11 or 12 agencies, departments that do research and development and are funded. There's 152 billion thereabout dollars, by the way, that aren't part of the 90 billion you folks tend to chase. And that's R&D, that's grants, that's broad agency announcements, okay? So FYI. But if you're looking at something like cognitive intelligence, I mean, who isn't starting to think about, hey, I'm going to start marketing my product with an AI, a machine learning element to it? It goes back to information analytics. We're now in the machines talking to machines, the Internet of Everything. You folks know this. If you're going to go in and tell me about a company that does something cool with cognitive intelligence and it's a machine giving insights, hey, that's going to resonate with me. It's where the government's going. Government wants to reduce its workforce. They want machines to provide that actionable applied intelligence. That's your theme.
also go to, I'm sure we all do, but when you go to these events, talk to government people that are there. You know, make sure you're joining in on the lunch and you find a table with a good crop of current government officials, and they're very happy to chat and provide information. That's where I get most of my good marketing insight, is asking those kind of questions. So take advantage. They're very open to talking.
And ask the people you're talking to that you're getting a sense, this isn't really the person that's going to probably help me.
Yeah.
You can be very polite in saying, wow, this has been extremely helpful. Who else in your agency that you, Mr. CIO, Miss CIO, are working with? Because I'd love some guidance on how to navigate this place. It's not easy to navigate any one of our agencies. Keith's probably is the most quagmired one of them all, if that's even a word.
Complex.
But you know what?
I
You
used to
need
look like
that.
McConaughey.
But you need that. Questions back.
Yeah.
So just a quick question here. I think we can all say sexy things, right? That may get your ears perking here, but it's usually first contact that's the hardest, right? And I understand your positions there in C level in the agency. We're really busy here. What's your preferred method of someone reaching out to you, or you know, how is it that generally somebody gets your attention?
That
is it
leads
through
into-
email,
Yeah.
or is it a phone call? And be honest, how far do you read into an email? You know, I could give you a big opus, right? But is it the first line, the first 3 lines?
Let's start with that. All right, let's kind of go through, because that's,
Yeah.
thank you, that's
That's a
segueing
good
right into one of our
question.
next questions. So let's talk about emails first. So you get a ton of them. We've all learned, try to send text emails, not HTML emails. Don't send a lot of graphics, so be simple with that. So Keith, you get emails every day. What do you do?
Delete them.
Before that,
So,
Round
back in the day,
five.
I was getting about 250 emails a day.
Yeah.
Amongst all the meetings, all the pain of customers yelling, I got to try to sort through 250 emails. The old expression, you had me at hello, right? Rarely does that happen on an email. If it's flashy, hey, can we talk? Meh. But went to University of Arkansas, big fan of my Hogs. I had one customer that I ended up doing business with that knew I went to the Hogs and had heard that I, like my Razorbacks, even though they suck. Early on, it was, hey, do you see this? And it was some article about, but it was about the Hogs, right? It wasn't about any of this work nonsense. And so I'm like, Hogs, I like that. Clicked on it. It was something about the coach isn't doing very well. And I'm like, yeah, this coach sucks. Well, the next email he sent me was another article inside the University of Arkansas about this coach is really going south. He's like, your coach sucks. I'm a dude. I like that S talking, right, about teams, because his team was some other team that I can't remember what it was in the SEC. That started a dialogue. That got
is
my
outside
attention
of the box
via
thinking.
an
I
email,
love that.
right? Just happened to know that was what I was interested in. And, I'm a guy that
Goes
likes
back
a
to
little S
something
talk.
Pete has said.
Yeah.
Good, Karen?
I mean, I never got beyond the hello either, because like you said, you get 250 or 300 emails. I mean, a lot of times people would get to me through my lieutenants, program managers who brought in folks, and then they would garner a meeting that way, or events that I went to, quite honestly, because you can't be afraid to come up and try to capture people at an event, at a morning presentation or so on. Another thing is we had industry days too. So that was just kind of putting some information out there, or sometimes doing market research. And yes, the room could be packed, but you could get in and actually try to garner a meeting or get in that way. Because other than that, I don't think that emails went very far. I don't think we even have the opportunity or time.
Pete?
Yeah, so in my 2 years being out, I think most feds will say that, it's interesting how industry treats the former Fed, and also when they're sitting there and who the people you're interacting with. But there's this, well, we got to grab that person. They got 2 years on a Rolodex, and then we don't need them anymore. That's cool if a Fed wants to adopt that, a former Fed. I think we all could tell you that for me, or at least I'll speak from my standpoint, I'm doing more work now with the marketing side of companies because I'm helping them with the messaging for their teams that go out there and knock on the doors. And if they have a Fed that they could find that wants to be that meeting maker, hey, all the better. But I'm finding that the marketing people who are supposed to be saddling the folks that are going out there and grinding, that's significant. And I think a lot of companies overlook that. So me personally, today, I'm working a lot with the marketing side of the house. Dots and Bridges is trying to help create messaging for marketing parts of companies so that those teams of people can go in there saddled with the right message. I mention that because when I was a Fed, I was kind of unique in a way. I mean, I had a vendor management program. I couldn't see as many people as I had hoped. That's kind of a thing that I just saw when I'd sit on panels like this when I was the CTO in a shiny penny. And people said, hey, man, I'm going to give him my card. I hope you can meet with me. I hope you can meet with me. You can't meet with everybody. Email, yeah, I wouldn't delete per se, but half the time the stuff would end up in a junk folder and I didn't even put it there. So you've got places like distributors, you've got value-add resellers. I think those same people, those extensions of your sales force have to have the same message. You have to be on the same page. But it does start with marketing, Louie, and I think the marketing folks...
We've trained you well.
Well, you got to be your own marketer, right, when you're running your own show. That aside from being your own secretary. But I don't know if that's resonating. My point is you can speak. I always like to say there's a lot of marketing and language and sexy talk at the 30,000 foot level. I will tell you, my perspective as a Fed was I was sizing you up as well. Because I would then say, can you bring that down about 15,000 feet and tell me what that means to me and my mission at my agency? A lot of industry doesn't want to necessarily answer that question. And I would challenge you that if you're not being asked that question, again, you're with the wrong person.
They're not tuned in.
They've tuned you out. So here's what I did. When I was a Fed, I loved off the beaten path kind of little get-togethers. I took advantage of any opportunity when the lights weren't shining and there wasn't some award ceremony, and I actually thought, I want to be somewhere where people are going to listen to me for a bit. And that is what's mapped into a bit of my business model today, which is how can I help industry as a broker, as a former Fed, spend a lot more quality time with Feds who just want to say, here's what keeps me up at night. So I would say to your companies, think about doing something that isn't throw a show together and offer it free to the feds, which you got to do, and have all the BD and folks show up when it's like you want to get inside the head of the Fed. So if it's talking about the hogs or talking about something that as a human being, a Fed is saying, these are the challenges I have. I got a boss I'm not a big fan of. I got a staff that doesn't do anything I say. I want to just spend more time reading about reports and spending time with, that's wonderful news to hear, and then you're building a relationship as such. So I think companies have to think differently about cultivating while at the same time prospecting your client.
I think it's also, we all have very busy days and families at home, but my goodness, there are so many cool events that take place after hours. An example is last night, Cyber Smoke. Cyber Smoke is something you should absolutely get involved in. There were over 200 .gov.mil attendees there, and industry last night as well. And it was at a bowling alley in DC, and they raised money for Puerto Rican schools. And it was an amazing time to network on a personal level with government. There's also a lot of other opportunities out there very similar to that. So I would encourage, as a marketer, find those engagements that you can share with your sales and BD teams, and the same on the sales and BD teams. If there's something you know about, share with your marketer, because there's probably a sponsorship opportunity that's not real expensive. So there's a lot of ways to network and get to know. Do you have a question?
Oh, we had one back here too.
Okay.
Oh, you had? Okay.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Michaela Shukair, and I'm with Leadership Directories. And basically what we do is help sales teams and marketers like yourself actually reach these CTOs, CIOs, and program managers, or the people that are holding the federal credit cards. So my question to you, Peter, is what sources are you telling marketers to use in order to contact these people? And what are the strategies that they should be using to collect those
well, it's not cookie
contacts?
cutter. I'll tell sources of how I go about it. I encourage folks, like I've been saying today, is it changes every month. People leave government. You should be attuned to who's leaving government, who's going to fill that slot. What do I know about that person? I respect that you're a company and an entity that offers that, being a connected Dots and Bridges entity yourself. I think we all are, by the way. It's just, again, my wife came up with a name, which was brilliant. But I think you have to watch the tea leaves. If somebody's been in a position for so long as a CIO or a CTO, that should tell you something. They probably know the landscape. Are they accessible? Listen to them when they're at panels at ACT-IAC and AFCEA and FedScoop and Meritalk and government marketing. And if they're saying, I'm a collaborative individual, you call them out on it. You walk right up and say, hey, here's my card. You can put it in the circular file. But I appreciated what you said about being collaborative. And again, experiences, when somebody said that to me, they listened to me, they're holding me accountable. And when you call them a week later, a day later, don't wait a week. That day, great seeing you today. Loved your comment about, Arizona, go Razorbacks. That's a connective little tissue thing starting. And if they don't get back to you, shame on them. Move on. Move on.
Okay, let's bring the question up front here.
Somewhat dovetails off of that. You rattled off a number of different media outlets. So when you were in your positions with the government, there's so much social media out there right now. There are all sorts of trade rags. What did you guys typically pay attention to from a marketing perspective? Things that caught your attention?
So what magazines did you read? What websites did you go to? Another thing we want to answer is there is a breakfast, lunch, and dinner event every day of the week trying to get your attention. What gets your attention, right? What makes you decide to go to an event? So let's talk first about where do you go to gain knowledge? Or do you depend on your lieutenants to raise that knowledge up? Karen?
Well, I mean, it's like the events that you called out, right? Whether it's a firm or AFCEA or IAC, because what made those so good, these are partnerships that we're in. Any federal lead who thinks that they can do it on their own, do it with just the team that they have, they're out to lunch. We're either going to sink or swim with the partnerships of the industry, right? So going to events like that, going to morning sessions, teaming up. I mean, a firm just did a tennis golf event. And I think the thing that we were talking about this a little bit earlier, having events that are around some of the socially conscious types of support is really good. Because when we talk to or go to your websites or work with you, knowing that there is a person behind the company, what you believe in, who you support, those are some standout differentiators. I know they were for me, and I think they are for all of us. We're just in that type of climate and environment nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And that's,
And so in addition to the magazines, the sort of usual suspects, what I liked is what the hell's going on at Pete's shop,
Yeah.
Karen's shop, that I didn't know about, that I wanted to know about. Well, who would tell me that? My folks are working, I'm working. If I don't see these guys maybe at an event, how do I know kind of what's cooking? Or even better, has the Australian government solved something around biometrics that I don't know about? Who can let me know that?
Yep.
You guys. And it doesn't just have to be your company did it. Because if you send me stuff that ain't your company on it, and it's solving a problem that you know that I'm curious about, ooh, you put this person over here because it's the mission and the trippy first versus whatever flux capacitor you're selling. And then we'll get to that. But that to me is interesting. How are other people solving these problems so I don't have to keep living in the, not to use a Trump, I'm living in the swamp, right? I'm drowning every day. How do I get the hell out of this if someone else has figured it out? Tell me. Bring that CIO in from Australia, a retired CIO from Merck, if we're doing, biotech stuff. Bring them in. Let's have that conversation. That's how you get this guy on board. That's the good stuff.
and I think we hear that a lot when we're all looking for federal speakers. Think about reaching out to commercial speakers, top 100, Fortune 100, bring in them. Tom Suter a couple years ago brought in, by the way, happy birthday today, Tom. Everybody wish Tom a happy birthday. It's a big one.
Happy 50th.
Yay!
No?
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
50's
Anyway,
the new 40, bro.
the ATARC team brought in the CIO of the NFL to talk about Internet of Things. It was so cool. So
You did?
Yes,
Because I
he
brought
did.
in the San Francisco Giants CIO.
Oh,
You
man.
trumped me?
No, yeah, that's right, you did that.
Oh,
You did.
Quickly
Yes, he
we
did trump
forget.
you.
But anyway, for an hour, as a keynote, we could have got Gartner, no offense, Gartner. That was one of the groups, and some MITRE folks and others, which is fine. But reached out to the CIO of the San Francisco Giants, fresh off a World Series. Everybody's like, that's the best. Why don't we do more of that? And he talked about how he was implementing wireless technology, so while you're in the seat, you get all of this, and everybody loved it, right? And it had nothing to do with the federal government.
So two points. Those of you who ever came to one, I know Tommy did, as a Fed, my brand as the CTO was nothing more than 3 letters, and for whatever reason, people said, oh, he must have cash and he must know something. I was the connective tissue officer, I told people. I created a technology summit series. I brought in the national labs to tell the stories of the great products that you folks sell, because hearing it from somebody that was affiliated with my neck of the woods, but wasn't me, I put 250 people in the room, and it was just an amazing half-day session where you'd have investors, you'd have the national labs talking about, like we discussed, not unlike this NFL opportunity, the perspective from the commercial side, or in this case, the R&D, federally funded research and development, was amazing. So you might want to just say to your colleagues in government, hey, have you ever thought about doing something where we could help facilitate one of your customers? Because every agency is tied to a national lab at some point. What if we put together something that would socialize a really cool opportunity where investments being made to discover a cure for cancer, or the next solar cell, or the next autonomous vehicle, something to think about. And then the other thing, simply, you should be asking, or in some way, shape, or form, conveying to that customer of yours, here's what's in it for you. Or, hey, do you know what's in it for you in terms of what we can offer? That's a question that most feds, because we don't have the time, aren't able to read a report, go to a website, distill and digest enough to go, I see why this product can help me do my job better, do it for them. What's in it for you?
You know, that brings up a
Meaning
topic
the
or a
Fed.
thought. I remember hearing from one of our ambassador CIOs that used to say, if one of her lieutenants came to her office to ask permission to go to an event or even go to a webinar, some agencies even require that, the first question she would ask, is it a need to know in your job? So when you're messaging, your marketing for events and for call to actions, use those words because I think they're useful. All right, more questions?
I'm curious with
Before we
the
close up.
audience, hands up, who's done that? Which companies that are in the audience have brought in the NFL or the CEO
A
of,
commercial.
retired CEO of Merck or someone from AIG into the government? How many
Good
companies
job,
have
Maria.
done that? How did it work? Was it well received? All right, so 2 people have raised their hand on that.
How many
Out
are
of-
going to do it in 2018?
Yeah.
More hands should go
More
up.
hands should go up,
Because
right.
feds will take those meetings.
They
we
will.
we want to learn from what others have done and a nice subtle message about how your magic helped them, but it's their story. Let them tell how great you are.
Okay, any more questions before we do our closing remarks? Yes, over there.
No, well, we're done.
What about other regions and other countries? You mentioned Australia. Sometimes we struggle for references, but we have references in other countries. Would their best practices resonate with you?
So that's like a case study from another government, international government, that could be used in federal government, I think is what you're asking.
Doing webinars or, you know,
Speakers.
Absolutely.
Same problem.
If you're doing webinars today, piece of advice, if you're selling a product, if you're going through an outlet to help do the webinar, introduce it with a practitioner who's got a great story to tell. If they're the CIO of the NFL or if they're the Australian embassy, I'm big on R&D, so I go to other countries to find cool stories. Let that lead in, follow up with somebody who's actually the storyteller in an agency of, oh, and see how they're using this product to do biometric research in India. There's a way to deliver a message through a marketing campaign like a webinar that isn't the typical norm, and that's bringing somebody that's off the beaten path, but not really, just a commercial visionary, a luminary, and then follow it right up with somebody who can tell a story in your company that sounds like you're speaking to Joe Sixpack.
Storytelling, that's very important,
Yep.
very important. I want to mention about Karen as well, because Karen is part of a really cool team of 3 former federal executives. They're all ladies, and they now have a podcast called The Federal View. And they've released 4. There's a few more coming, and it will be also something when a hot topic hits, they'll be able to do a podcast just like that. So I encourage you, go to iTunes under Government Marketing University, look up The Federal View, and you'll hear Karen and Martha Doris and Kimberly Hancher talking. So it's really good stuff. And if any of you have any questions, send that over as well to GMarkU, because we will make sure that gets on a podcast or gets to one of these ambassadors. One of the roles that they all play is being able to be of service to you, right? They're in consulting roles, and they also work for companies, but they want to give back. They care, just because they left government, they passionately care, and that's one thing I really love. And I think that came across today. I just wanted to also, I promised Henry Sienkiewicz I'd give him a little book plug. Henry is the former CIO at DISA. He has a bunch of these books from MX at his table in the reception today, so he's written a book on cybersecurity, and we really like Henry.
He's
So
a
make
smart
sure
guy.
you
You should read it if you're into
support
cyber.
Henry on that. All right, let's wrap up. Any other questions before we start to close? All right, I've asked each of our panelists to give us their final thoughts. They're sitting by the fireside chat with an industry person, and they're going to share with you their final thoughts. And we're going to start with Pete.
I'll go back to my opening kind of remark statement, which was mission, money, message. If you can triage those into whatever story needs to be told, then you'll be better for it and constantly refine it. 2, I like to work in 3, so second takeaway, parting shot. The government is so fluid, the seasonality of government, the revolving door of CIOs and other folks. Accept that, embrace it, but watch those tea leaves, because whoever's the deputy or whoever's the political, whoever's the incumbent, it's constant change. So don't lock in on one. It should tell you, I got to focus more on the mission of this organization, because whoever's going to be in that seat is going to want to be educated and curious, especially if they're new and incoming. They need the help. And 3 is simply, one of my favorite, facts tell, stories sell. If you're not a storyteller, then your company should have some really good storytellers. It's the connection. It needs to speak to Joe and Joanne Sixpack. when you're talking about cyber? What does it mean to me? Start telling your customers, your future customers, here's what my product, here's what my capabilities, here's what's in it for you. It could be compliance, it could be being innovative, and it could give them something that says, I'm not just a bureaucrat who comes to work to keep the lights on.
Great, great. Karen, and we're going to make sure these are all published as well, so. Good
Yeah,
advice.
I think this is so good because it's kind of giving you the tools that you can take back and really just start to crank out and implement. I would say, you know, be pliable and flexible when it comes to just understanding the environments that federal agencies are in. You've got a lot of information out there, whether it's the GAO reports or the OMB.
Yep.
But come in because you got to have that shared understanding, whether it's an agency or department that you're currently in or one that you're trying to get in. So that part requires agility. That part requires the pliability. But I would say be a little bit more stringent and rigid about you and what you do and what you bring to the marketplace. Because you can't be all things to all people. That's the worst, because then you're shooting at the hip, you're flying off, you're trying to figure it out, and you're letting something else drive you. But whatever it is, what your business is, know that and make sure you have the content up there so that when people go to your site or talk to you or you garner that meeting, that you know that is a connection, because that's the important piece. That's what's going to lead to that relationship, opportunity, contract. So those are two ends of the spectrum, but I think it's important to know when to be more on the flexible side, when to be a little bit more stringent.
Love it. So Keith, in addition to an important point is to wear really cool socks.
I'm matching today.
Yeah.
Love it.
My
Then,
dog's dressing.
let's have your final thoughts.
All right, so just on Karen's point, if you do everything, you're this deep, and here I say, meh, do 2 or 3 things. That's it. Or at least if you do a lot of stuff, just tell me you do 2 or 3 things. So then I have at least some initial sense you go deep. Don't tell me everything. Second is, I spent a lot of your tax money, some well, some horribly, my bad. Sometimes I screwed up, my staff screwed up, sometimes this group screwed up. How many times did this group ever walk into my office and say, on the next invoice trip, knocking 4 points off, our bad? 0. And that taste still in my mouth. So, recommendation. 50 people do cyber that walk in my office, 100 people do cloud, blah, blah, blah. If you came in and said, we're in the rowboat with you of risk. So if we screw up, we're going to give you money back on your invoice. If we say we're the best cyber company ever, oh really? You going to go with me on the hill? No. Are you going to give me money back on my invoice if we get hacked successfully? No. Get out of here. Be special, right? Get in the rowboat with me and row the damn boat instead of just taking my money. On the delivery side of the marketing is, everybody check out Got Your 6 TV. It's on Facebook Live. Anybody go to Facebook Live? How many go to it for federal IT stuff? There's nothing. Launch Got Your 6 TV for veterans and military folks, military spouses to help share their stories and pay it forward for the next generation. Wouldn't it be interesting, we were talking about someone from Australia or something earlier, what if you had your own show and you're not pimping your products and all of that is the main goal? You're on one side, a thought leader, and you got a thought leader from another group, and you're delivering it on Facebook Live. So I can watch it at home, sitting around, I can watch it at work. Get to me in a different way and bring those thought leaders. And you can put them right on the screen in front of me. You don't have to physically be there. It's not a webinar. It's something that where the kids are going to be in the next 5, 10 years. All the millennials are on the phone, and they will watch these things. Make it 10, 15 minutes, break it up into chunks, and don't just be market or product heavy. We've done about 500 minutes of interviews between me and these thought leaders, 23rd Secretary of the Air Force. There's maybe total screen time about one of my products on there, maybe 6 of those minutes, and it's just barely there. And then me talking about the product, total out of 500 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, maybe, over those interviews. So I'm not hitting them heavy with that, and that's not the point of the show. And I think that could resonate a little bit more with a different delivery mechanism to show that thought leadership, bringing in really smart people that y'all have worked with that have similar problems. I'd watch it, and nobody's doing it. It's open.
Hint, hint, hint. How do they find your Facebook Live?
Just go to Facebook and go to GotUR6TV. I took this face for radio right onto Al Gore's internet. So if you can put up with me on one side, it's really about the audience. I'm just guiding them through the questions, but they're telling their personal story, and it is awesome. And the hook of the show is called The Big Idea. And I'm saying this for a reason. I mean, it's a free show, right? You watch it. But the hook of the show is The Big Idea, where they talked about a personal problem while they were in service. We're going to get you on the show. Military spouses, veterans. What was a problem they faced? King or queen for a day. No association is going to tell you you can't do it. No politics, no nothing. King or queen for a day, how'd you fix it? Problem, solution. We're bundling all those up, talking to SBA tomorrow, we're going to be talking to DOV and VA. You go, this is your constituent, the voice of your constituents with very easy fixes to real world problems.
I love it.
That's
Thank
where
you.
this is different than the traditional sort of hammer me with a webinar that says your product's better than the next person's.
So everybody go watch. I mean, I've watched. It's great. It's great. Okay, so my final thought is within Government Marketing University, we do a lot of panels, and we had a panel recently with public affairs officers, current seated government public affairs officers, and we asked them a lot of questions about how to use logos, how to get case studies, how to get federal speakers, and it was quite interesting when we asked the four of them, how do we get a case study, the holy grail of case studies, and you know what happened? The four of them all looked at each other and they said, nobody really ever asked us. Oh my God. So I believe we don't do a lot of case studies because we think it's too hard. And these public affairs officers are really begging us to engage with them. They say they will do a case study as long as they're not endorsing our products. We get that. But if we're doing a case study talking about how your technology, your solutions helped them reach their mission, helped them make the warfighters more productive, they will do a case study. So we're bringing them back. Everybody asked for the public affairs officers, so we're bringing them back on Thursday morning, December 7th with a Market Chat Live breakfast. You can go to the GMARQ website and see it. But I encourage you to come because there's a mix of federal and state and local. We have the PAO from Fairfax County. He's been there 16 years coming. So don't miss it because, boy, they are our best friends. Okay? Well, ambassadors, again, thank you for your service. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, audience.